So as much as I think it is smart for most people to go for a more well-known brand for their first watch as they're collecting, I understand the desire to own something that is maybe off the beaten path, from maybe a smaller manufacturer that isn't as well known, because in a lot of cases they produce fantastic watches for some great value. And in this video, we're going to be looking at that subject specifically, looking at some great micro brands that you should know in 2022. Some of these are newer names, some of these are names that we haven't looked at in the past, but just wanted to go through this again. I try to do this almost annually, looking at different brands like this that should be on your radar that are not discussed as much as maybe some other major players in the industry. So just to discuss, what is a micro brand specifically? I think a micro brand is a brand that is going to have smaller production, is also going to be more of a boutique style and brand, but also is producing watches that are not going to have maybe the most robust of a manufacturing process, are perhaps going to have to usually use third-party movements and things of that sort, and are not going to have a leading independent watchmaker at the helm, but are start producing solid product at low production volumes. Some, of course, are not producing great products, but the ones in this video, I think, are producing some pretty solid products. Also, I'm going to be looking at 10 brands and 10 watches specifically, but if you want even more picks, we updated our top micro brands blog that features over 50 additional brands that are not even mentioned in this video. So if you want more after viewing this, check out that article down below. We always try to update that. I really want that to be the definitive place to learn about watches of these types. Check it out in the description down below. And while you're there, definitely check out the other content that we have on teddybaldassarre.com. I don't know if you guys know this, but teddybaldassarre.com is actually one of the most visited websites for watch-related written content in the world. We have over like 500,000 visitors looking at our blog and content every single month. A lot of that is coming from people that are just searching online. So if you want to get lost in that, we have a great individual that's writing a lot of this content, Mark Bernardo, industry vet, been in the industry for 20 years. Love reading Mark's articles. He has some great stuff that he's written. I learn something every single time I read one of his articles, and he's got some great stuff he's been working on. So definitely check it out, get lost in the blog, have some fun there. Now for our first watch and brand on the list, we have Scurfa with their Diver 1 Titanium. So this is a brand that was recommended to me by a member of our team, Ben Lowry. Ben, if you're not familiar with him, when he's not dropping watches out of a helicopter, he was also in a previous life a commercial diver. So he loves things all dive watches. And these, honestly, I was really impressed by them. I think they're great, no-nonsense watches. Starting price here, you have $230, 40 millimeter case, so very wearable. These kind of look and feel like a Black Bay 58 on wrist. It is a little bit thicker at 14.4 millimeters. A good reason for that is going to be the thickness of that crystal, 500 meters of water resistance, and a quartz rhonda movement on the inside. So Scurfa was founded by a commercial saturation diver, Paul Scurfield, in 2014. Paul was basically frustrated. There was a lot of dive watches that were designed for professional divers that couldn't actually hold up to their hard use. So Paul also was a major watch enthusiast, and knowing that exactly what an enthusiast would want, he was able to produce watches at a pretty no-nonsense price that I think just do the job. So this one specifically is available in stainless steel, but this one coming in titanium, which for around $200, really great to see. 500 meters of water resistance, sapphire crystal, a legit helium escape valve that will work, even though for 99.99% of people, that is not going to be something that will ever cross your mind. Probably have to add a couple additional nines there to actually be realistic. $200 though, grade 2 titanium case. It's kind of a spec junky type of watch, and I like the looks as well. Put this on a NATO strap, it's gonna look the part. I think, I don't have it with me because I think Ben just, as soon as we got this in, just hijacked it, but I was able to wear it as well, and I really like these watches. I think they stack up quite well versus the competition, and I have a person behind the brand that obviously just simply gets it. So next up, we have an interesting brand, and this is Wearer. So Wearer is a brand that specifically has been just getting brought up more and more, and I see ads all the time for them. People asking, hey, what's up with this brand? I wanted to give them a shot. This here is their D5 Tropic 39 millimeter auto. So this is a watch that retails around $640, 39 millimeter case, 13.7 millimeter thickness, lug to lug of 48 millimeters. So we're gonna wear a little bit larger than its case size, pretty much like a true 40 in its wear, 200 meters of water resistance, and a Miyota 9 series movement on the inside with a sapphire crystal. So Again, this is a brand that I've been seeing mentioned a lot more. Vera got its start back in 2016. They're based in Venice, California. And the D5 is their heritage-inspired dive watch with kind of this sector style, almost like roulette wheel style display with this 39mm case. One of the brand's big kind of known features or known points of their reputation is that you can get their watches assembled in different areas with US, Swiss, and Asian assembled options for many of their core models. The US assembled version of the D5 Tropic contains a Miyota 9000 series caliber, pretty reasonable price point as well for around $600. So for a 4 Hertz movement, absolutely on par with what you're getting from many of the other competition. I'd say the finishing and what you're getting here from the case as well as the dial, I wouldn't say is anything extraordinary, but it's pretty no nonsense, and I like the tie-in to the US assembly. I think some brands are maybe a little aggressive in pointing this out and kind of trying to pull at the heartstrings of people that long for kind of the traditional US manufacturing. But in this case, I think it is pretty cool that they actually are really assembling these watches in the United States. I think that's going to strike a chord with many people out there. And you're also getting some other options from the brand for around $200 with a US quartz movement. Yes, a quartz movement that was actually produced in the United States. It's just around $200. So I think there's some interesting things from this brand. I don't know if this would be the exact one that I would go for, but a brand worthy of taking a closer look at. For our next brand here, we have a brand known as Raven. This watch is the Raven Trekker, and it's a dive watch from a brand that has been around for a while. Raven is one of the older microbrands on the scene, having been founded all the way back in 2008, which is essentially an eternity for the microbrand scene. It's known for its adaptations of classic tool watch design language and kind of fusing some contemporary components. This one obviously pulling some design language from vintage Rolex Submariner Big Crowns, blended with a dial and handset that almost feels like the Seiko 6105 when you kind of fuse it together with those blunted hands and the dial layout with the markers. Finishing is the number one thing that pops out to me when I first handle this. For a $700 watch, it's pretty much everything that you would want and expect from it. Really well done bezel action. You're also looking at a dial that's really sharp, 9000 series Miyota caliber on the inside, wide range of colors to choose from. They also have a great source of kind of aviation style watches as well as field watches if you want something a little bit different, but pretty no nonsense, well-constructed watch for around $700 here, 39mm case, wearing like classic mid 20th century dive watches. And when a brand can be around for over a decade in this very competitive and oversaturated microbrand space, I think that's really saying something. So now for our next watch, this one was also kidnapped. I don't have it here with me, by Will. He just found this one wearing really great on his wrist and he's like, I'll take that and I'll wear that nonstop. So he just has that. I don't have it with me, but I did spend some time with it. This is the Unimatic U1 Classic. Really cool brand, Italian brand. This specific model retails around $700, 41.5mm case, 13.6mm in thickness. Lug to lug is going to extend out to 49mm, water resistance of 300 meters, and an automatic Seiko NH35A inside. So if you're not familiar with this brand, probably one of the more well-known micros in the past decade. Italian micro brand founded in 2015. They focused on creating a dichotomy of fusing minimalist design elements with rugged tool watch aesthetics. The U1 Classic is the brand's standard dive watch and really is devoid of any markings or anything that is unnecessary, which makes this watch have this simple yet clean look with uniform symmetry. And I would say for a brand that's really been kind of adopted by the watch community in a lot of outlets, Unimatic has to be top on the list for one that I think about quite often. You are getting a broader set of wearing dimensions, 49mm lug to lug, 41.5mm when you're looking at that bezel over a 40mm central case. I'd say it wears closer to that 41mm metric, all things considered, but pretty no nonsense, maybe a little bit expensive for an NH35 on the inside, but venerable movement. But I really do like the designs here. They have their own design identity. Some might say it's a little bit simple and plain, but I personally like the look of Unimatic's pieces, and I think a lot of other people do. They've been a brand that's really ascended in the last 5 or so years. So now for this next brand, this is one that I would say for this list is probably the one. There's a couple on here that I really like. This is for my own taste. I just think these are great. I'm not even a big car guy, but these just stand out. This is Autodromo. Autodromo is not a new name by any means. I've known about these guys for quite some time, but this was a cool opportunity to spend more time with some of their pieces and a wide collection of their pieces. I just think they make a great product, and they also have this really nice design identity. We have a couple different models here. The microbrand, it dates back to 2011 and really was a brand that aligned in a nice way with automotive culture. They produce other auto accessories, including driving gloves, wallets, and of course, watches. Now, the designs are meant to evoke dashboard instruments of classic cars and have this unquestionable vintage flair associated with them. I've discussed this brand in the past on the channel, but being able to spend some more time with these pieces, I was like, hey, I kind of want one of these. I want one for myself. The one I'm wearing right now is the Vallelunga. So this is more of this kind of Italian sports car design, and I just really like it. I don't know if it's the Italian in me coming out, but I mean, it's just a beautiful watch. Although these are going to be a little bit more attainable with an 8 series movement on the inside, you're talking around $600 or so. The design is really straightforward. You kind of see that dashboard type of look, maybe almost like a speedometer with what it is going for here. Another model family that has been long established in their collection is the Group B. It's a minimal in its design and pays homage to the 1980s Group B rally cars. It offers a nice 39mm case, and when this was released, it wasn't the crazy, just fanatic type of enthusiasm around integrated bracelets. So this is not as much following the trend. It was kind of, I think, looking ahead of where things were going when this was released. A slim 9mm case, getting an integrated style, but also here the stainless steel bracelet pairs with a titanium central case. So kind of an interesting concept. Miyota 9 series movement, 4 Hertz, as we discussed a little earlier. Variety of different color options with pleasing pops of color in the process. I think this brand manages to kind of look at that automotive culture without feeling so forced. I always see this with certain brands and they're trying to feel this certain way and try to create this cool design formula, but it just feels so inauthentic. I don't get that with Autodromo at all. You could tell that the passion for both the watches and the category of just automotive cars and everything of that sort is very much in alignment. There's nothing forced about it. So now for this next watch here, we have the Serica 5303-1. I don't want to say that this is the watch that impressed me the most. I don't think I had much of an expectation going into handling this watch, but when handling it within the stack of different watches that I was looking at for this video, this is a really cool brand, and I think they're doing a lot of things right. So this watch retails right around $1,000, case size of 39mm, thickness of 12.2mm, lug to lug of 46.5mm, 300 meters of water resistance, Soprod movement on the inside with a sapphire crystal atop. So this is a French Microbrand dating back to 2019, so kind of a newer brand, with the 5303 being their first dive watch. Much more distinctive and unique compared to some of the different watches we looked at. And what they've really done is fuse together a lot of the military marine design elements into one complete package. The case finishing on this is actually fantastic. Like, this is a very well done case. I believe the case is produced in Asia. Of course, the movement is going to be Swiss made, but the package here is simply phenomenal. Now, the case has these prominent facets on the lugs that have this mirror polish. It's really well done. You also have this hinge design at the lugs that works incredibly. I am really impressed. You also have this mesh style bracelet that is comfortable to wear, no pulling of hair, simple locking system with the clasp. I was really impressed with this in terms of just handling the case. I don't think they cut any corners here. I also love the multifaceted bezel here. It has simple click action, really good action at that, responsive with both its tactile feel and audible response. And then in addition to that, the hash marks from the 9 o'clock to the 12 o'clock compared to the typical that would be on the opposite side from the 12 o'clock to the 3 o'clock. Could be used for countdown activities, which I actually find as pretty intuitive if you are timing events throughout the day. Maybe you're cooking as an example. Really nice to see. Lume is also very solid. You have this glossy black dial underneath, but this was one of the brands that surprised me. Basically how we did this was we reached out to some of these brands and we said, hey, we'd like to be able to handle the watches, no promises on getting any coverage, but we want to be able to at least spend some time with some of your watches to see if, you know, they're worthy of being in a video like this. And this was one, after spending some time with it, I was like, wow, I'm just really impressed. The case is just exceptional, and I do think that if you are liking this military style, utilitarian design, another one to go for. For our next watch here, we have the Yema Heritage Superman, this one coming in a 39mm case. So Yema is a brand that definitely has been mentioned quite a bit in the comments. I know people wanted just my take on this brand, so I wanted to reach out, see a little bit more about the brand, as well as inspecting some of their pieces more. So just looking at this watch, you're talking about a price of around $1,200, case size 39mm as mentioned, thickness of 13mm, water resistance of 300 meters, getting an SW200 on the inside, and a sapphire crystal on top. So Yema is a interesting brand. It is a French brand that was originally founded back in 1948, debuting the Superman, its diver and most well-known model, in 1963. The brand was sold several times over the years and throughout history, and Yema once was owned by Seiko in the 1980s, believe it or not. After being resurrected under new French ownership in 2005, Yema's modern collection speaks primarily to its heritage models, with a broad collection calling back to the Superman that we have here, with this heritage Superman that we're looking at specifically being more of that faithful recreation of this 1960s design. It has this unique crown and bezel lock system, so when the crown is undone, you then can rotate the bezel, and then when you screw down the crown, the bezel will lock into place with that extra force from the screwing of the crown. This will allow with the lapse time to be more precise. If the bezel gets knocked, it will not move. So in those situations before diving computers, this was a necessary type of idea where your bezel would need to be very precise on telling the elapsed time. So that's kind of what this is looking back to. 300 meters of water resistance. Yema also uses language around in-house calibers. I think from my understanding, they're working with a provider to produce these movements, so it's a little bit more proprietary rather than in-house, but still pretty cool. If you have experience with Yema, especially with some of their classified in-house movements, I'd love to see comments down below. How have they been working for you? What are your thoughts on these watches? I think generally these have been pretty well received. I see a lot of people talking about them. I've heard some things about QC in general with some of their in-house stuff, but I think all in all, cool design, cool history, and a brand to definitely take a closer look at. But love to see any ownership stories down below for those looking at the brand. So for our next watch here, we have a new upstart brand that I thought was pretty cool, and this is Elka. This is known as the X020802. So maybe we need to work on the name, but the watch, pretty cool. So this watch retails for $1,500. Case size of 41 millimeters, does not wear to that case size. I say wear closer to a 40 millimeter, if not a 39 millimeter. Thickness of 11.6, lug to lug of 46.5 millimeters, 30 meters of water resistance. On the inside, you have a La Joux Perret movement, the G100, which we could talk about a little bit more in a bit, and then a sapphire crystal on top. So another resurrected brand name that was deep within the watch industry's past, with Elka having been first used for watches in 1877 in Amsterdam, not being a place often associated with watchmaking, but modern Elka was relaunched this year by Swatch Group industry veteran Hakim El Kadiri, working in the design department at Hamilton and Rado, producing some fantastic watches over the years for those brands. Now, while being yet another micro brand, kind of pulling on that heritage-inspired design, this one is a little bit more out there. I'll call this one the X02. It leans into more prominent minute markings rather than the opposite. For the point of around $1,500, I think it's a pretty cool package. I like this version with this orange outer track, and then also those large numerals with kind of these cream colored second hand with this really elaborate opposite side counterweight that just almost mirrors the exact length of the other side of the second hand. It's pretty cool. I like it. It kind of feels more of a pilot watch type of DNA fused together with more of this traditional three-hand format. I think it looks great. The other thing to talk about here is La Joux Perret. This is a manufacturing arm owned by Citizen, so you know that these are going to be solid movements, and they are solid movements. I've seen these being used more and more in the micro space, but the number one thing about these movements that is special here is essentially an ETA 2824 alternative, but these also have a 66-hour power reserve. So you're talking about almost double that of the traditional ETA 2824, which does give a huge upside and advantage. Now, as somebody who has a lot of watches with extended power reserves, it's hard to now go back to some of those 38-hour power reserves at times, just given how many watches I have and I'm trying to circulate things all the time. I always have to set it, which isn't the worst problem to have, of course, but is something that I think about. So that is another cool thing about these Elka watches. So next up, we have the Manta SkyQuest GMT. So a brand that certainly is not going to be a stranger to this channel. Case size of 40.7 millimeters, thickness of 11.8 millimeters, lug to lug of 47.4 millimeters, 300 meters of water resistance despite its GMT pilot style and what it's going for. Automatic SW330.2, so with that extended power reserve, and a sapphire crystal. So if you're not familiar with Manta, started in 2016. They're based in St. Louis, Missouri, which pretty cool. All their watches are made in Switzerland. And then in addition to that, really have established this reputation of building watches with incredibly well-finished cases and dials, which I will absolutely stand by. They make some fantastic watches. Now, most of their designs are not going to have this newfound sense of watch design that they're bringing to the table, but they are, no question, well done, and they do not cut corners by any means when it comes to the watches that they're producing. This model here is known as their SkyQuest and has this GMT flare, kind of in alignment with what you would imagine with a GMT Master and their own reinterpretation of that. For the latest iteration of the SkyQuest GMT, it features new colors on the bezel, including the Pepsi with the golden gilt accents, offering their great clasp with micro adjustment, and features the upgraded variant of that SW330 with that 56-hour power reserve within. Movement does not allow isolated function of that local hour hand. However, it is under 12 millimeters thick, and even considering the unnecessary but welcome 300 meters of water resistance, I think that's a pretty cool package. So for our last watch here, we have Vortic with the Lancaster 164. So I'm going to talk quickly about Vortic, because you're gonna look at this watch, maybe look at the price and be like, what is going on here? This doesn't even, this looks like something crazy is happening here. And that's kind of true. There is something crazy happening here. So Vortic is a brand, they're based in the United States, and they have a unique microbrand type of concept. They were launched in 2014, and what they are known for is this process of taking, a lot of cases, more vintage American pocket watches, primarily from brands like Hamilton or Waltham, and transitioning those into giving them new life as a wristwatch. What the brand does is they source old pocket watches, then they restore them to their original function without removing the vintage character, as you'll see with this iteration here. You know, the dial still has some of the just classic blemishes of just natural aging, which I think is cool. Then they test the movement for functionality, primarily at multiple positions, given the typical static positions of pocket watches and the movements that are housed within here. So they try to get that up to spec. Then they'll create and mill a case in the United States, and then they will assemble also in the US. Here we have a model known as the Lancaster 164, a watch that clearly pays honor to the original home of Hamilton when they had their production in the United States. The dial and movement are from an old Hamilton pocket watch and is placed into this machine 46 millimeter titanium case. This model specifically is based on a pocket watch produced in 1935 and features Hamilton's beautiful 904 caliber, showcasing stunning bridges, a large balance, roughly 12 millimeters in size, with an equally large regulating organ, and small nods to American watchmaking of the period with the Lancaster signature and the motor barrel, a system used in some of the premier American brands during this period, something that I became more familiar with after visiting RGM and Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Now, with this movement being 36 millimeters wide, it is going to make this watch really appear large, and it is large, simply that. 46 millimeters by 55 millimeters long, virtually no water resistance. Despite these being expensive and very specific in their focus, I do think this is a novel concept and done well. So if you are somebody that thinks this is a cool idea and just want something that is just different, this is a interesting brand to take a closer look at, especially if you're in the United States and want to get into some of these watches, maybe a pocket watch, but never could really pull off that type of idea, and want something that's recreated without just totally just getting rid and stripping the identity of those original pocket watches in the process. But all right, guys, that is my look at 10 micro brands that you should take a look at this year. In addition to that, if you want even more micros, I recommend checking out our article with an additional 50 in that article. Have a link in the description down below if you want to get lost even further. I think micros are one of those subjects that I always just say tread lightly, because some of these brands, again, not going to have the same brand equity if you're earlier on in your journey. You know, really establish what you like first, because I do think these are a little bit out there in terms of what they're going for. But if you're somebody that's more established and you're collecting, you know exactly what you like. Some of these are a complete breath of fresh air compared to some of the major brands out there that are just doing the same thing over and over again and really not delivering maybe on the value perspective, at least in certain pockets of the industry. So if you want more, definitely check it out. Article down below. If you like these videos, we can keep doing them in the future, but love any encouragement with the thumbs up, subscribing, any comments down below as well. If you've experienced these watches, those are all great indicators that you want to see more of this in the future. Also, definitely check out TeddyBaldassarre.com. TeddyBaldassarre.com, full authorized dealer of 30 brands, quick and fast fulfillment, dedicated customer support. Also, how this is all funded, how this content is created, how our team is supported is through selling watches on TeddyBaldassarre.com. We do not get paid from the brands to create content, including a video like this, where it's very easy to exchange, dollars with the brands. I covered all these watches just because I thought they were cool, and I'd like to keep doing that. But the way that we are able to support all this is through selling watches on the site. So definitely go check it out, TeddyBaldassarre.com. But guys, thank you again so much for watching. Be well, and I will see you all very soon.